Okay, so here we are in 1835, and I've started with that initial packet, and we see what I remember happening every game. Players 1 and 3 have the option to get a minor company. Minor companies are better than privates, there's no question. The only option that was perhaps at all of interest was between the Saxon and the Nuremberg Firth. Saxon's usually, I think, preferable. So now, and I had to check the rule on this, the fourth player is stuck. Nuremberg Firth or nothing. Now, if he goes with nothing, and everybody goes with nothing, then, okay, he doesn't have to buy that. But this guy, at the very least, gets his revenue. I'm not sure if these things get to run. I think they do. Which means half the players will have an advantage. Does he want to play chicken? I don't know, maybe. I really, it's such a bone to be handed that. But, so, if he buys this, the next two players get minors. Boom, boom. Then, there's the first player is going to have an option between one of these two, either which is terribly bad or good or whatever. The third, or the owner of the Saxon, gets a choice probably between this and the remainder of one of those two. And then this guy gets a chance at a second private, or a second minor. I don't know if, I'm not thrilled with the options that are available, so it's quite possible that I will pass. And it's quite possible that we might see everyone fall into that obstinate trap. I'm going to see what happens. So the fourth player, and remember, if you haven't watched many of these before, you can't remember. Whenever I'm playing one of these games and something normally would go clockwise, I do it counterclockwise. The first player's up here, running down. This is the fourth player. Went ahead with the Nuremberg Firth. He ended up getting himself a minor. Everybody except the owner of the Sachsen got a minor, actually. And he's feeling kind of boned for having bought that because things fell poorly for him. But I think that's pretty common, and I think that's one of the points, is in this game, and maybe any with minors, things can fall poorly, but let's go on. Privates can be a big deal too, but at least you had control in 1830 which one you see. You have the ability to bid on them. You don't just have, you want this one or nothing. Okay. Anything terribly interesting fall out? I guess the most interesting, and I've seen this happen a lot of times, Berlin, the two Berlin railroads in one person's hands. Everything did sell out though. Even the Pfalzbahn, which is really kind of a bone, at 150 for a share of Bayersch. That's, to me, always been one of the more painful purchases. Sure, you still have a minor that's producing 15, but here's the thing. Unlike privates in this, unlike privates in 1830, they just produce income. They're not worth anything else. I mean, yeah, you have some rail space somewhere that they control. And I'm not even sure where it is or how it's marked. I'm probably going to have to look those suckers up. But Pfalzbahn, where would I find that? I would think it would be somewhere in the Falls. Should be down here, I guess. And I am just not seeing it. Ostbahn controls these two hexes. Pfalzbahn may not have an actual space. I'll look up its special rules. Anyway, this is kind of the point, though, that the opening layout is almost forced. There probably are very, very few that are going to show up among players unless somebody's kind of random or somebody says, "Hey, I'm not playing this game. I'm not interested. I don't want to buy the Nuremberg Firth. It's yours if you want it." That kind of obstinance, to me, that's difficult because if one person takes it, why shouldn't this guy take it too? If it's a good move for the first guy, why isn't it a good move? Well, okay, it may be a bad move for this guy because if nobody buys it, the three people over here are going to do well. And that's kind of the force. Is that worthwhile? Is it reasonable? Would somebody over on this left-hand side of the table who already has property buy it? I don't know. I really don't know. But you know what's cool is this guy can now buy shares. I mean, he can't. He only has $20. But we're going to go around and try to see if anybody wants to buy certificates in the actual corporations. Okay, so again, the shares, everybody went around, and we saw a share of the Bayersh bought over here, a share of the Sashish bought over here, and here we highlight another one of my gripes about the opening of the game. Now maybe this guy doesn't want a minor. Maybe he wants just to hold the directorship of the Bayersh, even though he bought the minor before he got the directorship, right? But he's got two people sitting to his left, but it would be right in a normal game, with two shares. The same as he has. These are people who have the train on him. They get first purchase from here. He's not going to hold that thing. He can't be president. So now his question is, well, he doesn't want to necessarily just destroy it, but he certainly doesn't want to run the thing particularly cleverly. He's probably going to run it for maximum profit. He's not looking to hold on to it. Maximum profit's usually the case anyway, but he doesn't have any real hold on the company. Buying this president's certificate wasn't worth anything to him. He did not have enough cash to buy another share. That may be simply a matter of the six-player game. I remember the game falling out a little better at 5. It didn't feel quite as frozen, and there seems to be an option for a 7-player game, although I don't know if the rules really state that it's supported, but at least the numbers are stated there. Anyway, this is very much the kind of opening setup I'm used to. People aimed for the minor companies, they see them as more valuable. There's an option that you can make the privates a little cheaper, which may be more desirable, but a little cheaper isn't going to make much difference in terms of what's worth having. And we see the Sachin not starting. There simply isn't enough money to start it. Somebody bought an extra share, but really, this guy would have had to have bought a share probably to have any chance. And even then, the cash just wasn't out there in this number of players for whatever reason. The way things fell. I've seen it start maybe once or twice. But the Bayersh in the hands of a president who's almost guaranteed not to be able to hold it. Because there's an advantage to the president holding something. Something I didn't tell you at the introduction. Some of these shares are different. So the Bayersh has its normal 20% director shares. And there's 8 more certificates, each 10%. And the same thing with the Sashish. But as you go down, obviously the Prussians are going to be different. I showed you. They've got 5% shares. The second tier has a last share, which is also 20%, which can change, whoever buys that last share could get the presidency all at once. And then the third tier has the first 3 shares are 20% shares. That's kind of weird. Okay, I'm going to go on and into the operating round because the stock round's done. We've got priority here. And you run privates first, then the minors, and then the one corporation. And I'll come back after that. So, after the end of this operating round, there's only one in here. Got some interesting situations and a few things that maybe I forgot to say. Well, I know I forgot to say. Well, first thing with the interesting situation, or not so interesting, is every single one of these miners bought a single 2-train and laid pretty conservative track. You're not allowed to run Berlin to Berlin. You're allowed to run on some of these double X cities, but Berlin is not allowed. Hamburg is allowed. You can go from Hamburg to Hamburg, which is kind of cool. Until it ends up getting, I think, promoted into a singular city. The thing I forgot to mention, and I thought about it. The 2-train could run down to Dresden, take a swallow or whatever. It's not worth it. These games, you always, I think, and I may be wrong about this one, but I never saw anybody succeed in this. You always want to make cash, and taking a turn off, well, more than one. So next turn I'll be running. If I bent down this way and worked my way here, it would take me like 3 or 4 turns before I'm running. And, everybody else is making money and I'm not off that railroad. That's just not a deal. Helping out the 3-train, that's minor comparatively. So the other thing is, during the first phase, when the 2 trains are out, the big companies get to lay 2 yellow tracks per turn instead of just 1. They're also able to lay, and this is weird for a 30 background, they're also able to lay on the private company spaces and force the closure of the private companies that way. So, for example, if I laid on both the Ostbayern spaces, this guy's income could drop because of that, and he gets nothing out of it. Now, he spent $120 on a share that was worth 92. All right, so we're in the stock round now. As I said, we go to the guy with the choo-choo, and we'll see if anybody can buy any shares. I think some people can, because they had a heavy investment in miners. We'll see what they got. No one had money for it, so we go into the first operating round of the second turn. And I'm going to send this one up to you guys because it's long enough that it makes sense to do so. And then we'll start getting into sort of the real play of the game, I think.